If you could be a professional in any other field unrelated to what you do, what would it be and why?
I would probably like to be a stay-at-home dad, probably be fed by my wife and not really have to do anything, just maybe waste time, read books, take my dog out for a walk, and chill.
So you will not be a professional in any field. That's
Yeah, I
that's
will
the
not be a
answer.
professional. Yes.
Fair.
I will be a
Good.
book reading professional
Book reading professional. Cool.
at academics, and maybe we used whatever little we were taught to other things. I think we were fascinated by many things more than just computer science, right? And I'm fascinated by, and when I talk to, let's say, Gaurav or Varun, I think we are uh, fascinated about design, fascinated about business, fascinated about human psychology and why things happen a certain way. I think that the education that we received is just a very powerful booster that helps us do things maybe better than some other folks. Every board meeting, the only message that gets driven is that the only thing that's real is EBITDA and free cash flow. Everything else is unreal. And we may cite whatever metrics, etc. They're like, look, all of this is besides the point. There's only one truth for a business, which is EBITDA and free cash flow. And they're very patient. We are not there, but they're very patient
In today's episode, we join Gaurav Agarwal, co-founder and CTO of the healthcare startup Tata 1mg. With about 2,000 crores in revenue today, 1mg is making healthcare understandable, accessible, and affordable. Join us as we talk about Gaurav's journey from IIT Delhi to Zynga and now building 1mg. Gaurav, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Aviral and Mazin.
Awesome. So we'll start with a rapid fire. Karan Johar seasons are few, but we are all seasons. So we'll go first. If you could be a professional in any other field unrelated to what you do, what would it be and why?
I would probably like to be a stay-at-home dad, probably be fed by my wife and not really have to do anything, just maybe waste time, read books, take my dog out for a walk, and
Nice.
chill.
So you will not be a professional in any field. That's
Yeah, I
that's
will
the
not be a
answer.
professional. Yes.
Fair.
I will be a
Good.
book reading professional.
Book reading professional. Cool.
I almost think of starting up as a marriage. Um, it's really like a marriage, all the ups and downs, except that when you start a marriage, it's the honeymoon. When you start a startup, it's basically like the worst thing from hell, because all hell
Okay.
breaks loose. So I would say it's marriage reverse, that when you start a relationship, you go through the worst years of that relationship, and then if you survive, then it gets better, gets a lot better.
Very interesting. Hmm. What was the last book that impacted you deeply?
Last book. Oh,
Or any book that impacted you deeply, it's fine. I mean, either ways.
yeah. That's a great question. Oh, actually, yeah, that's a good one. So I've been meaning to read Gita for a long time now, because everyone who's read it it's like one of those things. Everyone who's read Gita wants you to read it, and so I'd been putting it off for a long time, and then finally I got around to reading Gita by this professor, actually late professor Eknath Easwaran, who's supposedly used to be an expert on Indian classical text, like the ancient Indian text. And I read that book, and frankly, I don't think I've read anything as profound. Um, and Anything that profound. The fact that as a race, as a species, we could have philosophy that was so deep. God knows how many years back, at least 2,000 years back, is just mind blowing. That we still continue to scratch the surface and regurgitate the same ideas. I think that was just mind blowing. And there's one phrase from that whole book that just stuck with me, which is that uh, to do or not do, that's the only option you have. Uh, you actually don't have any other choice. right? And so, so it's kind of given me this perspective that whenever you're faced with any situation, for that matter, right? I tend to overcomplicate it, right? Because you think ahead, you sort of think of the outcomes, etc. But the fact, if you boil it down and take a really reductionist approach, the fact is that you actually just have two choices, sort of to do or to not do.
Nice.
And in that moment, I felt that was really profound. Oh, I love the Zomato and Blinkit guys here. I think that the kind of intensity, the hustle, the excellence that they bring to their business, that they've been able to bring to the business, and how many times they've been written off, but they keep coming back, it's just phenomenal. And I've seen both Zomato and Blinkit. It is Blinkit from fairly up close, so just have a lot of respect for them.
Yeah, I think their Blinkit was probably written off just 2 years ago also. So I mean, we'd written a piece on Blinkit, and it's like a roller coaster or snakes and ladders, whatever you want to call it. But those guys have been on it. What's your favorite hiring question?
Oh, my favorite hiring question is the question I ask at the end of the interview when nobody's suspecting it. And I'm letting out a secret because I still do a lot of interviews, and that's what's your biggest failure? And and yeah, and the responses. It's a great. I find it to be a great question because half the times people are shocked because they are in this groove of an interview where they are doing, let's say, case problems, etc., and then they're like, oh, what the hell just happened? And then if they give me, let's say, a very like MBA style answer where they pick a failure which is not really a failure,
A
then
failure.
yeah. So then yeah, yeah. So that's my favorite question.
What's the most interesting answer you've got on that? Just curious,
What's the most
if you
interesting
remember.
answer? Yeah, all sorts of interesting answers. So there was someone who had 20 years of work experience who had actually had no failure whatsoever. Uh,
Oh,
and then someone who had a failure, yeah, no really interesting. So people either give like really candid answers and where they talk about how they really messed up and
okay.
how it keeps coming and haunting them back. The people who've talked about why their startup failed because they couldn't, let's say, get X, Y, Z in order. So those answers are very candid. Otherwise, people just clam up and don't have an answer. So, yeah. What's the one truth that few people agree with me on? You know, I'm a very direct kind of person. And so, uh, I realized that direct and not very gentle. And yeah, yeah. So there are direct and gentle, and then there's me, direct and not gentle. And and I've tried to convince people for many years that once you sort of peel back all the layers of niceties, etc., then the direct approach where you're just brutal works a lot better. And I don't think anybody agrees with me on that. People keep trying to coach me, change me. Maybe you could have done things this way, that way, etc. I've tried to change over the years also, but I sort of revert to the mean very, very quickly. So I just feel that direct and brutal is so much better than all these niceties that we sort of try and fake and hide behind, and then actually don't really have the real true conversations.
That's a good one, and I think it's fair, and I see why a lot of people would disagree with you.
Yeah.
Um, would love to learn more about your journey growing up, and at the pit stop at IIT Delhi. One thing I'd love for you to answer, if you can, is IIT Delhi के पानी में क्या है, which is why are there so many big founders who come out of it, like yourself, Zomato, Flipkart, Blinkit, and the list is endless. So maybe that as well, along with your journey. If you think there's something about that time frame or that group or just the institute that's kind of enabled this.
Yeah, no, so look, journey-wise, very, very straightforward journey. I grew up in Kanpur, which is my hometown, and standard upbringing. I don't think I was good at anything uh, other than maybe studying. And studying also, like, I am my natural state is very like lazy. I don't like to do much. I don't know why. I think I don't know why, honestly, but I liked my natural state is that of rumination and laziness, which is of course not really not very good for let's say your mental health perspective. But I've always from my earliest memory, I can remember that I've always been fascinated by information. So have been an avid reader. When I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of exposure to English or anything, or even reading materials. So I would read whatever I could get my hands on, and my mom used to order Sarita Greshoba, so I would read them page to page. We would get 2 to 3 newspapers, Hindi newspapers in our house. We were a Hindi household. I spoke English because I went to an English medium school. I would read 3 newspapers in the day because there was really not much else to read. I would read Rajan Iqbal. I don't know if any of you have exposure to, like, you get these pocket books, which are these small, like, cheesy, campy Hindi sort of books. So I would read Rajan Iqbal. We didn't have money to buy a lot, but we would have these rental shops. So I would go sort of sit there, maybe rent books and read. And that's really the enduring memory I have of childhood. I grew up in a joint family, so we were like 5 kids growing up together. That was just a lot of fun. And I didn't really know much about IITs until I got to maybe 8th grade or so. And that's when, from a career option standpoint, there weren't too many things that someone like me could do. So I was like, कि ठीक है चलो IIT वाईटी के लिए पढ़ लेंगे. My preparation started in earnest maybe in 12th grade. We had some family challenges, etc. when I was in high school, and so it didn't really go anywhere. I didn't get through IIT at the end of grade 12. I went to another college that I had gotten admission to, and I sort of left on day one saying that either I'll go to a good quality college, or I will actually study something else in Kanpur. So I took a year off, prepared. My parents were very kind that they said कि ठीक है कर लो, and I got through JEE the next year. And one thing was very clear to me. I've also been reasonably self-aware, so I was very clear that I was completely dependent on my parents. Like classic, I couldn't do anything by myself, and so it was very important for me to get out of home. So
Yeah, I was going to ask why not IIT Kanpur, which was at
yeah,
that time
so
at least top or
yeah,
close to top.
yeah, yeah. So IIT Delhi was my first preference. IIT Bombay was my second preference, and IIT Kanpur was my third preference. So thankfully, fortunately, I got IIT Delhi and then got to IIT Delhi. So yeah, that was the work. And answering your second question, what's in the IIT Delhi waters? I don't know, man. I think so. Maybe just the exposure, right? The fact that it's probably one of the only IITs that is bang in the middle of the city. There are more people who are trying to figure out, how to do socials with Delhi University, girls' colleges, than actually figuring out how to get grades in class. Right? And it rubs off on everyone. In fact, I remember this really funny incident. I studied computer science, and computer science was very formulaic, right? In the sense that we came in, usually got, top grades in school. Everyone applied for masters, published research papers before we graduated. But our batch was very different. We had really low GPAs. So we had average GPAs, but not like really high GPAs. Um, and and at one point, I think a professor in computer science department said that this is by far one of the worst batches that he has taught in the history of IIT Delhi in the computer science department.
Okay.
And right, so we were like many of us actually, all of us. So we did the standard things, right? All of us applied, got many admits for masters, but then many of us actually didn't take our masters admits. And this was the year 2001 when we were graduating. So 2000 was when there was a dot-com bubble in the US. All of us got placed in 2012. So for the first time, we had crazy number of offers from the Bay Area and the US. So most of us took those offers. Many of us took those offers and did not go to do masters and PhDs, which was a powerful course, right? And actually, it's crazy the number of entrepreneurs we have in my batch. One, Gaurav, who's just IPO'd his company.
TBO.
Then
He wrote about.
TBO. Then Bluestone founder Kushwaha is Gaurav Singh Kushwaha again is my batchmate. Then Aspiring Minds Himanshu. Then OTP Varun. So
Wow.
crazy number of entrepreneurs in this batch. And I don't know. I think we were just useless at academics, and maybe we used whatever we were taught to other things. I think we were fascinated by many things more than just computer science, right? And I'm fascinated by, and when I talk to, let's say, Gaurav or Varun, I think we are fascinated about design, fascinated about business, fascinated about human psychology and why things happen a certain way. And I think that the education that we received is just a very powerful booster that helps us do things maybe better than some other folks.
No, that's cool. I think even that same decade has so many founders, so there's obviously something going on there. The Flipkart guys, Zomato, Blinkit, all in the 2000s. You spent 3 years at Zynga. What was that experience like, and how did that help shape your journey to 1mg?
Yeah, I still feel, and I actually think I should write a LinkedIn post about it sometime. I still feel that Zynga was where I really discovered myself, because Zynga was the place that taught me that once you drop this veneer of nicety, you can actually have a real conversation. And
Okay.
getting shouted at, shouting at people, was just par for course, right? And once you got past the initial shock, it just made things like very real. And I went into Zynga, so a little bit about my background. So before Zynga, I actually had no experience with consumer internet. All my experience was doing. So actually, my first job was writing operating systems at a storage company, and so for 8 years, I wrote operating systems at different levels of complexity. So wrote some high availability code, wrote some file system code. Even
And
did
what is a
crypto.
storage system for people who don't know what a storage system is? Because it seems like it's from another era.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for reminding that. But basically, all computers have a hard drive, right? So hard drive is your
Right.
local storage system. But before the advent of Amazon Web Services, etc., most companies most large companies had their own data centers where they stored these really large servers. Really large servers typically needed to store large amounts of data somewhere, right? So to give you an example, um, let's say Yahoo's email service would store terabytes and petabytes of email data somewhere, and they could not store it on regular hard drives. The reason for that was that regular hard drives had a high failure rate, they had low performance, especially when it comes to retrieving emails at a very, very fast pace, security, etc., right? So NetApp, which was my first job, used to make these enterprise grade systems. So they would take what we would call JBoards, which is just a bunch of disks. They would put them together and they would actually build an operating system on top of it. And these hard drives would work at 10, 15 times the speed of, let's say, your average hard drive. And the reason they would do that is because they would parallelize data. So instead of writing to one drive, you would actually write to 10, 15 drives all at the same time. There would be resilience, so you're not just writing, you're actually replicating as well. And there would be, this data would then be copied to another system, all happening in real time on very, very high quality, right? So my initial experience was working on this. Then, did storage, did file systems, did cryptography at one point. So at one point I was in a small startup which got acquired by NetApp, which was doing national security agency level security, right? And I was working with these really, really smart guys. I don't think I was even like 20% as smart as them. Like MIT dropouts and Stanford graduates who were basically building, cryptography algorithms, right? And I learned so much about them, about the scope of security, etc., in a system. So did that, and then I was really bored, right? Because when you work in an enterprise company, to do anything, and we were working on systems, so to do anything took us 2 years to do. And by the time 2 years were over, market would have moved along, or things would no longer be true the way we had envisioned them. So I was like, okay, I'm done with this stuff. I need to do something else. And a colleague had moved to Zynga, and he said that, hey, do you want to try this? So I interviewed. Zynga just had a different energy altogether. So imagine 2 years to get something done, and then imagine interviewing at a place which got done like every 6 hours, 8 hours. So right, and it was just crazy. So all my interview just focused, like the interview questions were also very interesting. So they asked me that if you were to do 2 releases a day, how would you organize your team, right? And
Wow.
if your system was to go down like 2 times a day, right? What would you do to actually make sure it doesn't go down, right? Stuff like that, right? Like real problems. And then when I somehow managed to clear the interview, they asked me, do you want to join a game team or an infrastructure team? And I was like, no way I'm going to infrastructure, so I would do a game team. And they gave
I'm
me
done with infra.
right. So I was like, I'm done with infra, and I got Farmville, which was like crazy.
Oh,
They
wow.
were running around with their head on fire, and I joined them as a director of engineering. And the first day I go in, of course, it runs like a classic business where the business guys don't really understand tech, but they have revenue targets to meet, and there's this intense pressure on the team to ship at least once a day or twice a day, because games are essentially content releases, right? You ship a lot of content, and people, at least Farmville was, right? You ship a lot of content, people buy
That's
that
a
content, you
very
make
good
money.
insight, by the way. Games are content releases. You're
Yeah,
correct.
games are content releases, right? And
Mm.
and the way, and Farmville was very young. It was just like, I think, a year and a half old. So the first day I walk into the studio is maybe 80 to 100 people. 40 of them, 30 of them are technology people. And everyone's crowded around one computer, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? So I walk in, there's no welcome, nobody cares about who I am, what I have come to do, etc. So I find a place to sit, which was empty. And then everyone's crowded around a computer. I'm like, what's going on? So they said, we have the first Founders sale going on, and there's a bet with Mark, who was the CEO of Zynga, and that if we cross $1 million, we go somewhere. If we cross $3 million, we go somewhere else, right? So I was like, okay, that sounds like great. So that first day, same day, Farmville hit $5 million in revenue, and
Oh, wow. In a
just by the
day.
virtue of just that day. And we all got to go to Hawaii, and I got to go because I
You
had
got to
joined
go
on
to
that day. No
Hawaii.
real contribution. Yeah, for no contribution whatsoever, I got to get on a plane in a few months' time and go to
You
Hawaii.
you asked you asked the important question. What's going on? I guess that's why
What's going
you
on?
went to Hawaii.
What's, what's going on? Yeah, and I feel that look, a lot of people have written a lot of things about Zynga. How, let's say, some things are not great, etc. But I just think that there are so many things that got right. Right. I think I do believe that there are a lot of things that got wrong. I don't think, at least at the time I was there, we didn't quite figure out how to make games that were not just built on top of Facebook's this distribution machinery, right? And I don't think we had figured out a balance to be a game or a product management company, right? Zynga was built like a trading company, a product management company where data trumped everything. And after Zynga and then 1mg, I think that's only half true, right? That's only half true, right? Story is a really important part of the story, maybe even more than data in a lot of instances. And so Zynga is when I think I discovered myself, right? From having to let go of a lot of team and actually rebuilding the whole team, to asserting myself and saying that, hey, I want to run this team, myself, my way, and then actually building a lot of things at scale there. Were all the things that I learned at Zynga, and just being direct, being in a culture which really appreciated being direct, being upfront, being honest, not sugarcoating. I felt was just amazing for me.
Awesome. And just talking through how you got to 1mg after that.
Yeah. So while this was all good about Zynga, but games are a tough business because games go up and games go down. And I realized when I started to do it is that games require an insane amount of creativity. It's like a movie business, right? You have to churn out hits. I don't think maybe today I could handle that better, but I don't think I had the right skills then to build new games. I wasn't really helping with what was going on. I was fairly senior at the company. And I was frankly burnt out, right? I'd seen farmers transition from almost $1 million to 750K when I started to run it, to maybe 400 odd K when I handed over to the next person who ran it. It was just really tough. Yeah, seeing a business, managing a going down business, just probably the toughest thing you can do. And I was burned out like crazy. And I'd always also had this feeling at the back of my head that something would happen to my parents in India, and I wouldn't be there to see them, right? So there's these couple of factors that came in. My wife, she was at Facebook, early Facebook employee, and we both said that, look, we've been here for 10, 12 years. We'd both moved to the US directly from IIT Delhi. And we thought we'd take a couple of years break, move back to India, see what it's like. Prashant, who's my co-founder at 1mg, is my batchmate from IIT Delhi. So when we moved back, it was a natural question. And we are like, I'm from Kanpur, my wife's from Delhi. So Delhi was the natural place for us to settle down. And then, I called Prashant. So I initially came and joined HealthKart as their CTO. But then, there's not a lot of technology that you can do in a nutrition business. In 2014 end, when we were starting to demerge, they were starting to demerge HealthKart from the pharmacy business, which was very, very small at the time. Then, Prashant asked, and the board asked if I wanted to join 1mg as a co-founder. And that's how 1mg happened. So yeah, serendipity more than anything else. I would say that when we started 1mg, I think there were not very clear role definitions, and so funny, the first question that we had to ask, because there wasn't a lot of focus on 1mg. There was no 1mg before 1mg, right? It was called a different thing. It was called HealthKartPlus. So the first order of business was actually finding out what the name was, and we did this like really small exercise, whiteboarded some names, and came up with something that we all liked, bought a domain. I think the first question, just to give you a sense of how things used to work back then, the first question that we had to ask was, at what rate should we grow, right? And there's really no comparable, right? Like at what rate should a starting company grow? And so Prashant and I were chatting about it, and I said, it seems like all early stage companies grow maybe 20-25% month on month. So he was like, okay, let's do that. So then we said, okay, 20% month-on-month growth is the target. And every month we would sit down and say, Kya, how do we grow 20%? And then that would start like this crazy, whiteboarding of plans and experiments and stuff. It was literally like flying by the seat of your pants. I don't think we knew what we were doing. There were lots of challenges every day, but somehow at the end of the month, somehow the numbers got met. Okay, if not 20, some months 22, some months 15, 17. And the problem was that if you met a month's number, it didn't mean that the job was done. It meant the next month had just started. So we had to start all over again. So my earliest memories of 1mg are just like plain chaos in some ways, where we were just trying to figure out so many things, how to grow and how to hire a team. We didn't really have a lot of money, but we had reputations, right? So we could go say that, hey, oh, Prashant's from Stanford, I'm from IIT, I've done Zynga, come join us, we are going to change healthcare. And I'm really grateful that there are enough people who believed in what we were saying, probably with no proof point. Today there's a lot of proof point to 1mg in what we have built. But I just think that there was a certain there was a certain believability to what we said, and we managed to at least attract some folks. So those were the early days, but there was no role separation per se. We both, all of us did what needed to be done. I think once 1mg became a little more mature, maybe 2017 odd, 1.5 years in, and we brought on Tanmay, who's our chief operating officer. Tanmay took over growth, and the roles became a little more, I would say, streamlined, where Prashant focused a lot on business and fundraise. I focused a lot on tech, because those were some core years of building our stack, and Tanmay focused a lot on growth and supply chain. So those were the years then. And then in another couple of years later, 2018, things changed again. So I started to do not just technology, but also growth. So today at 1mg, I run not just technology, but all consumer businesses as well. So e-pharmacy, diagnostics, and growth. And then that's how we split the roles. So Prashant heads new business initiatives, anything new that needs to be created, especially from a business development, etc. standpoint, and of course, legal, regulatory, investor relations. I've realized that my zone of operation is cracking growth and structural problems and figuring out how to solve some of them. Yeah. So 1mg is actually very, very gung-ho on physical infrastructure. So we, of course, for our delivery supply chain, we run reasonable amount of physical infrastructure. We have some 80 plus locations, but mostly not 80, 30 plus locations, mostly back-end locations from a delivery and diagnostics infrastructure standpoint. We have approximately 50 retail stores today in 4 cities, so 4 or 5 cities. So Delhi, Gurgaon, Jaipur, Kolkata, and Dehradun. And we're opening around 250 more stores this year. So we are in a rapid build-out phase for offline. I think what we believe is happening in India is that I would say that we are still in early evolution of the market, right? So what's happened in traditional, let's say, Western ecosystems is that you have fragmented retail, which leads to organized retail, which then gets disrupted by online, right? So it's basically organized leading to other channels of organized and fighting it out, duking it out. What's happening in India is that there are two sort of simultaneous disruptions, or let's say what's the right word for it? Rejigs happening. So one is that there's a massive move towards organized retail in general. there's a move to online as well, and then there's this third move of actually digital public goods, which are saying that, hey, it doesn't matter if you're a fragmented ecosystem from a supply standpoint, but hey, here's some demand, let's say through ONDC, etc., that we can provide, which actually lets you compete and survive, right? So there's almost everything changing all at the same time. The way we think about this problem is that we think about this problem in much more simpler terms, right? So we feel that when we started out, our goal was to, as Aviral mentioned, goal was to make healthcare understandable, accessible, affordable. And the second aspect there was to build an integrated platform, right? Integrated platform means because we feel that a healthcare consumer doesn't just need medicines, right? Also needs diagnostics, maybe counseling, consulting help, etc., etc. So what we are saying is that we don't want to be locked into a channel which is online, right? It's a way to acquire customers. It's a way to deliver services, right? There's no reason to be locked into that thing. We're basically going to bring the 1mg goodness to consumers regardless of the channel that they're in. So today 1mg does consumer both online and offline, increasingly offline. And we also do B2B2X, right? So B2B2C, maybe at some point B2B2G, but I don't know. But we want the goodness of 1mg to be available to consumers regardless of how they access it. It can happen through an affiliate intermediary. It can happen through their corporate employer. It can happen through a retail store. It can happen through AR and VR, whenever that starts to offer such services. So we think, and we honestly think, that offline is really important. Yes. And, again, I think the one experience which I've felt to be true, and I think it's probably helpful for anyone else who's starting out as well, that the world's fairly large and you don't need to convince everyone. And, in every ecosystem, there are early adopters who actually believe in your vision and who are smart enough, maybe not even smart enough, who are smart enough and opportunistic enough to at least take a punt, right? So I remember the first round that we raised after 1mg sort of branched out was from these guys from Maverick who are based out of SF, right? And so they were here to do their due diligence, etc. And we took them, across Yamuna, which was stinking at the time, to meet our warehouse partner. So at that point, which was very early, I think 2015 sometime, we only had two partners. Our business was just in two cities, so Gurgaon and Delhi, and we had just two partners, right? One who was essentially retail and a wholesale distributor, and the other in Gurgaon, who was essentially running a retail store. Like, it was a family retail store. The father used to run it, but the son was, I think, in some Big Four consulting, and he felt that this could be very interesting. So he had a day job, but he hired a small team, gave us the store, right? And that's how it happened, right? People came up. There was a value proposition to them. Of course, that value proposition to them came at loss to us. So it wasn't the smartest thing for us to do. But if you're willing to give up margins, there's a lot of people you can convince to make profits, right? And in those days, we didn't make any profits, but a lot of other people made some profits and hence worked with us. Yeah. No, that's a great question. Again, I think so. We are actually very similar in our beliefs and principles. So 1mg is very, very high on ownership, very diffused on, very, I would say, like, we don't like to make decisions. In fact, one of the things that I keep telling all the folks who work with me, and I know this is true across the board, is that if you come to me for a decision, then essentially I'm doing your job. And so don't come to me for decisions, right? And so we were very clear, and because we had seen this, like Zynga, for instance, was like this, which is a very diffuse decision-making environment, very, very high degrees of ownership, accountability. Sure, I got yelled at when I screwed things up, right? But it didn't reduce. I didn't get fired, right? I made mistakes, enough of them. I didn't get fired, so there was always this comfort that you could make mistakes as long as you were making them with the right intent and learning. So we wanted to make sure that when we built a company, a big draw for me, and I know for Prashant as well, a big draw for me was that doing a company was more than the business, an opportunity to build an organization sort of in our principle set, right, in our value set. And that value set was, again, very irreverent, very independent, very driven, very self-motivated, and very intellectually honest, right? And those are really, I think if you come to 1mg also, by and large, you will find these values play out. People don't like to be told what to do. They feel free to argue back all the time that, I don't agree with you. Can you prove this to me? And it works both ways, right? There's so many folks who have grown, and we've also learned that there's so many folks who've grown with us, who now actually, some of them shout back at me, right? And I tell them, okay, this is cool, right? Like, I was wrong, maybe you have a right to tell me. And when we make mistakes, I've often gone to my team and said, hey, I was wrong, thank you for setting me right. In fact, there's this one incident about 1mg which I still remember. I have this used to have this person who used to lead the iOS team, and I wanted some change to be done in iOS, so I told the product team to get it done. They went to this guy to say, hey, Gaurav's asked for this change, get it done. And he basically told them flat out, no, I disagree with this change. I think it's the wrong thing for the consumer, and I will not make this change, right? So the product team came to me. I was, of course, super pissed off. So I went to him, and we don't have offices at 1mg. We all sit on the floor. It's a very, I would say, non-hierarchical setting. So all of us sit on the floor. We have conversations together on the floor, out in the open. So I'm having this conversation with this guy where progressively I'm getting more upset. My voice is rising. He's getting upset as well. And he's trying to be respectful because I'm older than him, but his voice is rising as well. We have this really really abrasive conversation for 10 minutes. And then eventually I say, okay, I agree with you. Thank you for standing your ground. And I walk away. And, to me, that's I take a lot of pride in the fact that we had someone on our team who was actually able to do this, right? It's really amazing. And we have a lot of people like that on our team, right? Who will come and tell me that, look, I think this is BS. I need to come back and counter you, but I'm not doing this, right? And I think that's 1mg culture, that just be awesome. Honest, intellectually honest. Yeah.
How has the journey with Tata been for 1mg after 2021? Has it changed ambition? You've got access to a much larger organization.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What have been the changes, and where are you looking at now? What does the future look like?
I think when we started, we used to think that if we could become like $1 billion company, that would be so cool. With the Tatas coming in, I think they're helping us think that why can't you become the largest healthcare company in this country? Why would you have an ambition that is, anything less? And they often cite, we are the Tatas. We will take it slow and steady, but we don't want to be anything but the largest, the biggest, whichever adjective you pose. So I think that's been a really big sort of boost for us. I think the consistency in how they are on the board, the consistency in how they want us to run the company, and the freedom they give us has been pretty cool. I keep telling all financial investors, and you look, Aviral, you've been one, but there's a lot of sort of seesaw, right? Market's great, why don't you grow? Market's poor, why did you grow? Why didn't you cut? Right? And we've been through enough of those cycles, but they are very consistent. Every board meeting, the only message that gets driven is that the only thing that's real is EBITDA and free cash flow. Everything else is unreal. And we may cite whatever metrics, etc. They are like, look, all of this is besides the point. There's only one truth for a business, which is EBITDA and free cash flow. And they're very patient. We are not there, but they're very patient in helping us get on with that journey. And I think lastly, I feel that just the maturity that they've brought to how we run the company, I think has been super helpful because they have some of the largest retail companies in the country. They have some of the best supply chain companies in the country, let's say Motors, etc. They have great processes, which maybe we are too young for, but they have been very open to giving us exposure and helping us to learn from that. So I would say it's been great, right? There's both overall I think it's been very, very positive.
And what are your plans for the next, say, 5 years? Where do you see 1mg going?
Yeah, I feel, as I said, that there was a time when we used to think about, if 1mg was $1 billion company, it'd be so cool. I think what drives, at least me, and I think a large chunk of 1mg is that I feel we can solve problems that are really hard and that nobody in the ecosystem can solve. And I think it's for a variety of reasons, right? One is we have the ambition and the intellectual horsepower to do it. I think the second is we are a technology-first company, right? Which brings with it a lot of advantages, really. We don't have any of the legacies to, let's say, deal with the legacy ecosystem. And I think when our business is also being built in a way that a lot of these things are getting unlocked. So when we think about 1mg now, we're actually thinking about how do we fundamentally, move the ecosystem forward and change how things are done in the ecosystem, right? So a lot of the work that, and again, these are tough battles, right? So there's a part of it which is, of course, going to be business as usual. How do we become an omni-channel company? How do we do retail? How do we do pharmacy? How do we do diagnostics? But the problems that I'm talking about are what can we do in cancer care that, let's say, only a company like 1mg can do, right? How do we bring care, right? A lot of health in India is I would say transactional and episodic, right? And we've been very fascinated about therapy-based care, right? How do we build care continuum, right? And care continuum is actually a really, really hard thing to do because first and foremost, you have to think about what does care continuum even mean, right? How does a customer interact with it? How does the continuum get built and then get maintained and services get delivered, right? So that's like one deep area of work for us. How do we build actually for, let's say, large therapy areas, care continuum? I'm personally extremely fascinated about the health records problem, right? And the way I think about that problem is that we've always been very fascinated about what data can do to, let's say, make healthcare better, right? The challenge with that simple statement is that A, first and foremost, there was no data. There's no digital data in the ecosystem to begin with. And B, the value pool is very, very limited, right? Because in India, healthcare value pool is only like transactions, right? Pharmacy, diagnostics, right? It's starting to change now, but mostly there. So for the first 8-10 years, most of our focus was on transactions and then making sure that all the data that we got was essentially digital data, right? Today, what we are starting to actually talk about is that can we flip this cycle, right? Can we go from data to interventions, right? Can we start to show users, because look, we have millions of records of millions of patients, right? And can we start to use that data together and actually build smart, insights, interventions, etc. on top of it? Can we innovate? Can you innovate how a patient? So today, when you go to a doctor, you get a prescription, right? You upload that prescription on 1mg, you get medicines, right? who's going to do this job of helping you understand what the doctor saw you for, what did he diagnose you with, what medicines did he prescribe. There's so much of that journey which is sort of unfulfilled. So we are like really excited about, especially with AI coming in, we are really excited about fulfilling that journey. So therapy-based care, fulfilling that journey. Another area that we are very excited about, and maybe foolishly, is that there's a significant amount of stack that we have built, which we think is pretty actually phenomenal, at least for this ecosystem, right? And how can we actually make that stack available for others to innovate on top of it, right? So when we started, our view for 1mg was, let's say, a transaction platform. Today, we think of ourselves as a healthcare operating system, right? A healthcare operating system has the basics, which is, let's say, customer able to create accounts, being able to, order medicines, order diagnostic tests, talk to doctors, etc., etc. Now, once you have a basic operating system, imagine the kind of services you can create on top, right? You can create protocols. And by the way, these services don't need to all be created by us, right? They can be created by third parties. Because why does everyone have to go figure out how to deliver medicines, right? There's a rail, just use it, right? You will get medicines in 30 minutes. In large cities, maybe in 24 hours in small cities, right? So you can essentially, people start to focus uh, on the value added layers in the healthcare stack, rather than all being limited to actually delivering the nuts and bolts, right? And the cost of innovation for the higher level stack actually starts to go down, right? So that's really how we are thinking about, the next 5-10 years of 1mg.
That's awesome. I think the concept of a journey itself is super
Yeah.
cool. Um,
Yeah.
to close, and why we call this Founders Unfiltered, and you are a big believer in unfiltered feedback. What's one piece of unfiltered feedback you received that really changed your perspective as an entrepreneur or even before?
Yeah, there's one that I actually tell a lot of people about. So there was a time in my career when I was very close to getting fired. And
Okay.
yeah, so I was working with this really senior guy who actually had sold something to management. He's a very, very, very sharp guy. Again, no hard feelings at all.
Hmm.
And he needed a Mundo to do the work. I
Okay.
became that Mundo because I felt, it'd be so exciting. This guy was really senior, connected at
Yeah.
the highest levels of leadership. I would
Right.
go to meetings with him, and, he would sell a vision, and then I would build it. And so many of my friends who were my peers or seniors in the company said, it's a terrible idea. And this is again all in the operating system, right? So,
Right.
when you make mistakes in the operating system, you basically get a core dump, and the system, like in easier parlance, it's the blue screen of death, right? It's
Yeah.
it's not
Correct.
it's not very very generous in forgiving your errors. So my friend said, but I said no, this guy is really smart, it's a really great career move, except that whole plan backfired. And
Hmm.
I came very close to getting axed. And then a friend stepped in who was senior, very credible. And I was going through this phase where said, look, I worked a lot on this and it was a hard problem, etc. And this guy said that, I understand, but focus on the undeniability of success,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
right? And that's a message that has come back to me like so many times when I've picked problems, because we often get emotionally attached to problems, and we forget this simple moniker of success. And that one advice that you always have to focus on undeniability of success. That
That's
can you articulate like very clearly that for all the work that you did, what was the success, right? And this brings back to the other, truth that I mentioned, which is once you take off all this veneer of hard work, etc., etc., right? The
hmm.
bare bones is actually brutal, right?
Yeah.
And
Correct.
he gave me this feedback, and I think that's the one feedback that I find really valuable.
That's awesome. We also had another founder mention a story of being close to being fired, and the feedback that he had got from his senior was he didn't get fired eventually.
Yeah,
So he was like
same here.
really happy. He was really happy, but his senior told him that you shouldn't even have been in consideration. I think that also stayed with him. So I think these, really tough situations also,
Yeah.
the advice that stays with you, it's fantastic. I mean, I agree with you. The
Yeah,
undeniability
I
of success.
honestly think that failures teach you so much more than successes. And
That's why you asked that question too.
that's
It
why
kind
I
of
asked this
completes the
question.
circle.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
And yeah,
Gaurav, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It was super fun. I think we can go on for hours, but unfortunately, we keep it a little short.
no, no,
So
absolutely.
thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing your story and your learnings.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.